Hi, so here we have got the Lunar system. This is a machine that we actually manufacture ourselves and we've made for many years now. And what is so popular about this system is that it's what's known as a multi-platform system. So you can get the laser on here, which I'm going to demonstrate in a second. So this is the Q-switch laser, but you can also have on here IPL as well. So for those of you that may be interested in treating other conditions such as hair removal, thread vessels, pigmentation, collagen, acne, you've got those modalities as well. And lastly, you can also put a fractional laser on. So this is an active Q-switch laser, and we use this in our clinic quite a lot. We have got two wavelengths in here. We have got 1064 and we have also got 532. So you can see here that we've got the computer interface and there's various pieces of information there that I will run through with you. And so you can see that we've got what we call an articulated arm. So this is an active Q switch, as I say, and it has to be delivered in this style of articulated arm, and it's a metal casing because it's so powerful and strong that if we delivered it through a classic fibre, it would actually blow. So we need to deliver it in this metal casing. So normally when you see a laser like this, it tends to indicate that it's active and it tends to indicate that it's quite powerful. And one of the things that we're going to have a look at is spot size. So this is the size of the laser beam that will come out the other end. Now this particular laser is quite unique in that it just has one spacer, we call it, on the end. So this is a spacer. So you can see there, that is your sort of, we call that a spacer because it's a certain distance away from the skin. And then this is just a device that can simply slide on and off. So we can essentially change our spot size, which is something that we will teach you to do, and we'll talk about, why we do that in a second. And you've gone through this no doubt in theory, but the way we change spot size is by simply pressing the buttons down and then just sliding the spacer along. So we'll have a look at that in a second. In terms of delivery, you'll see also going to do the treatment, how we are going to use it, but predominantly what we advise is to keep it perpendicular, so straight, and make sure it is completely straight, and the spacer is actually touching the skin. So the spacer is touching the skin or a millimetre away. What you don't want to do is lift it up here. By doing that, you will change the energy, so it should be near to the skin when we actually fire. So before we have a look at that and how to sort of adjust that, we're going to just have a little look at the software first. So obviously all machines are slightly different. They all have their own mode of sort of operation. But with this particular machine, you can just about see that you have got 4 boxes. So you have got wavelength, you have got spot size, you have got fluence, and you've got rep rate as well. So the way that we teach you to program the machine is to change the wavelength first, because that's the first piece of information we need to put in. We need to know, are we using 1064, so for example for black ink mainly, or are we going to use the 532, which is green light and is mainly for your red, orange, yellows, pinks, those sorts of colours. Purples, browns, can be a mixture, so you've just got to decide which wavelength to use. If you're not sure, you can actually test both. And so we would program wavelength first. So if I wanted to change it to 532 on this system, all I need to do is just press that button and it automatically changes, so nice and easy. And I can change it back as well. The next piece of information then is to change spot size. So at the moment, it's programmed quite a small one. What we teach is always start on a large spot size. So, find the largest that you can. The reason for this is because the bigger the spot size, of course, more ink you will cover. But really the reason why we teach this for tattoo removal is because larger spot sizes will drive a little bit deeper, and we want to get quite deep with tattoo removal. We then actually, the next piece of information I personally program in is over here, and that's fluence. And fluence, of course, is incredibly important. This is energy, this is the amount of light that we're going to use. So at the moment it's on quite low, it's on 0.5. I can increase that. 0.5, you know, and above. What that's basically indicating is per centimetre squared. So at the moment it's on 1 joule per centimetre squared. Some systems will actually work in millijoules, and so you'll be working with hundreds and thousands. That's very normal. That's just like working with millimetres and centimetres. It's just a different way of measuring. We always teach to start on quite low, so you could start at 0.5. We tend to start around about 1, and obviously test the reaction. So are you getting whitening? Are you getting response? If you're not getting a good enough reaction, we would encourage you then to turn it up. And you may just turn it up by a little bit, or you may actually think, no, I need to turn it up by quite a lot more. So that's something we'll look at in the practical, and how to identify whether, you know, it is responding or not. Lastly then, we can change the speed. So again, we'll see this more in the practical, but we can fire at different speeds. So this is called rep rate. So 1.25 is 1 1/4 shots per second, 2.5 is 2.5 shots per second, and then the fastest this goes is 5. Some systems can go up to 10, some systems go up to 20. They are obviously incredibly fast, and we tend to only use those speeds on larger tattoos. For a smaller tattoo, if you use a very fast speed, you could actually overtreat, and of course that is not a good thing, and that's not what we want to be doing. So wavelength first, then spot size, then fluence, then rep rate. As I say, rep rate, to be fair, you can program before fluence, but that's the methodology that we use. And what you've got to be mindful of is that when you tweak one of those settings, it could affect another. So what I mean by that is, as I increase the fluence, for example, and I just keep going up, so let's just say I'm patch testing and the ink is not responding, the highest fluence I can get there is 2 joules. Now the reason for that is because I'm on a 5mm spot, and what it's saying is, well, I can't give you any more energy than that over a 5mm, it's just not possible. So if I want more energy, more fluence, what I have to do is change it to a 4. So I would change it on the computer screen. You also must make sure you change it on here as well. So we'll look at this in a second. But if you don't change it on here, they don't match, and that's going to cause you a problem. So you could be over-treating, or you could be under-treating. So it's really important. Change it on here, change it on there. Some of the newer, more sophisticated systems actually have spot size recognizers. This one doesn't, but some of them do, and they'll actually know when you've changed it. But I don't know if you've spotted, and it's not as easy to see on this particular video with the camera here, but that fluence has now jumped up to 3.2. So because we've reduced the spot size, the energy has now gone up. So it was on 2, it's now on 3.2. You may decide that that's actually too much, you didn't want as much as that. So of course you can put it back down again. But the point here is you cannot get any higher than 3.2. So let's say, well, you want to get higher than that, that's not enough, that's not getting you the reaction that you're looking for. Repeat the process, so drop it to a 3, change it on here. Now, as you can see, you can get up to 5.7. And of course, you can do the same by going down to spot size of 2, change it on here. Now you can go up to 12.7. So that is how you would adjust that. But as I say, be aware, changing certain things will have changed another thing, if that makes sense. So just keep your eyes on that. Always check all of your settings. If, of course, you change wavelength, then that changes everything. That changes, first of all, your settings, but also, of course, the colour of light that's coming out the other end. So in terms of changing spot size then, for this particular system, as I say, this is actually unique, really, to Lynton. I personally haven't seen many like this, but they have adopted this sort of one spacer concept, so you don't have to keep changing the ends, and then all you do is simply press the buttons in and release this out. And then I'm not sure how well you can actually see on this camera, I don't think that's the clearest, but you can probably just about see there, and I'll show you on the other camera later, that you've got different numbers, and of course you can see the colours. So the white strip is a long pulsed ND-YAG. We don't want that, we want Q switch. So then the red is a Q switch, but it's a 1064, and the green is a Q switch 532, which makes sense because obviously 532 is green light. And then what I don't think you can see, unfortunately, terribly well on this camera, but you can probably just about get an idea, is you've got different numbers on there. So you've just got to make sure that you are looking at the right colour and you're putting in the right number. And then you can just adjust that like so. Make sure this has got a protective lens on there. Make sure that's kept clean. You will find that skin spatter can get on there and can cover it, and we want to make sure that it's not covered in skin, because otherwise a laser beam will actually struggle to you know, physically get through. Some of them don't have this protective lens, it's just the main lens, so again make sure you keep that clean. We normally use just simple alcohol wipes. It is safe to do that. The alcohol evaporates very quickly, just obviously don't have it saturated, but make sure you do keep that clean. And of course, clean the ends. I mean, that's always a recommended, obvious thing to say. That's touching, you know, somebody's skin, or certainly the black part will touch somebody's skin. These actually can come off, so you can actually use one per person. So that's another thing to be aware of. So say that's the setup of this particular system. The last thing I think really just to tell you at this stage is that this machine is foot pedal operated. You can't normally get an articulated arm a button. So you can just about see there that we've got quite a cumbersome foot pedal, and so literally you would just operate it with your toes and it will fire. So that's how we work with that one. Audio, but then just see. Are you all right? Okay, so you can see that we have got a tattoo here that has been treated a few times now, so probably around about sort of 4 treatments so far. You can see that it has faded in some areas, and so where the line was thinner, you can see more fading. Where the line was thicker, you can see less. You can see that there is some colour in it as well, and the colour has faded a lot, but you can still see there's some pink left, and actually just the remnants of purple. When they're at this stage, we will still use some 532 to work on that red, but we don't need to do as much work as we did obviously in the beginning. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the 1064 first. We're going to do the black outline, which is what we always tend to recommend. Use the 1064 first, because what you tend to find is that 532 does work on black, and we don't want that. You know, we want to use the 1064. It gets deeper and it tends to cause less blistering, whereas the 532 can blister quite a lot. So black first, then you can do your colour. So machine setup based on what I showed you earlier. We've started on quite low settings just to sort of show you the process of, you know, if you want to increase it and turn it up, then you can do. So we started quite low. So for anyone that wants to know, we are on 1 joule per centimetre squared, which is quite low. And also I'm going to use a little bit of cooler as well. So in a second, you'll see the laser come in. You can just about see the handpiece there, and you will see and hear the cryo, which is just blowing cold air. So the foot pedal, obviously I've got where I want it, and then it's just a case of getting your aiming beam. So you can probably just about see that red light there. So it's about getting that red light where you want it. Where that red light is pointing now is of course where the laser will come from. So at the moment I'm too far away from the skin, but I'm just showing you that red light. Before I do fire, just to say I've cleaned the skin, make sure there's nothing on it, no dirt, no makeup, no anything. And the hair has been shaved off as well. Hair can be a barrier. So where's a good place to start? I would start with this pencil ink. So we might start at the top part here. If it doesn't work there, then it's certainly not going to work where the ink is lighter. So if I get this lined up now, I'm going to try and do it so that you can still just about see. So you can see it there. I'm going to bring the cryo in as well. I'm just going to try a couple of shots. Okay, ready? The client's only feeling it, you can see by the movement, you can hear some noise, you can just about see some whitening. It's probably not that easy, unfortunately, to see on this camera, but I'm just going to zoom in. Yeah, you can't see it terribly well, unfortunately, but you can just about see some whitening there. So already we're getting some response that we want. That for me is very average. I'd want to try and increase it, but of course it depends on the client. So I'm just going to ask the client now how that felt. About 6. Take a little bit more. Okay. So just to increase it a little bit more, obviously you have to bear in mind the client's pain threshold. You know, that is really important. You can use numbing cream before, they can take painkillers, so there are things you can do obviously to help that. So I've just increased it to 1.3 joules now, and I'm just going to test that. So again, get the cooler. It's worth saying that the first part is all the worst, unfortunately. You know, most clients tend to find it numbs itself after a while. So in a different part, not the same part, I'm going to test. 1, 2, 3. Bearable. So the client's saying just, so we're not going to turn it up anymore, and we don't need to because you can see now on the camera, I think, you can see definite whitening has occurred. So you can just see it here. Remember, that's a temporary effect. It won't stay like that. That's just gases and steam and vapour being released. That is just a temporary effect, but that's a really good sign. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give the client the cooler to hold, and they've got control of it then. People tend to prefer that. I'm going to turn it up a little bit, so it might just increase the noise slightly, unfortunately. So the client's going to be holding that. So it means I've got, obviously, my 2 hands to keep myself steady. I'm going to do a little bit faster now as well. That's being a bit too slow, and actually going slower can be worse. So I've just got now to 2.5 hertz. So we're going to try that. So double the speed. So again, get your aiming beam on the skin, and we're going to try it now. 1, 2, 3. Is that okay? Is that bearable? Yeah. So the client can tolerate that. Obviously, it's not pleasant. As you work along other areas, just stop for a second, reposition yourself. Because if you don't, you will be at the wrong angle. So you can see that I'm trying my best to keep it straight as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we do want it to be straight. You can see that on some bits it's picking up really well. You know, great noise, great lightning. On some of it less so, just because of that thing there. And it can go faster than this. So this 2.5 it can go at 5. It just depends on the client tolerates it or not. Do you want to try 5 or just I'll just show a little bit of 5, just so you get a feel for how fast it is. This is really to do with how comfortable the client is. Some clients prefer it faster because it's done quicker, some don't. People find it actually more painful if you get more shots per second. It's also depends on the size of the tattoo. If it's a very large tattoo, I would use 5. This is not that big, so 5 is quite fast. So I'll just show you on here. The double speed again. 1, 2, 3. So you can see then much faster. So it means you can work a lot quicker, which is great, but as I say, it just depends on that client that they can cope with that. What best to do, 5 or 2.5. So the client's asked for it to be turned down a bit. That is fast, and therefore it can be more painful. So just going to work along here. This is a bony area, so unfortunately it's going to be a bit more uncomfortable. And then we're going to come down here, and this can be quite uncomfortable, unfortunately, as well. I don't know to point that out to clients, obviously, but they soon learn that for themselves. So you start in, doesn't matter where you start. 1, 2, 3, and just work along. If you work the obviously like this, where it's down or across, depends on the loose place. But if you think you've lost your place, what I would say is that while it's white, it's really obvious where you treated. Once that whitening goes, then of course it's less obvious. But once that whitening goes, you should have swelling. So it should be easy just to run your finger over, and if it feels swollen, then you know it's it, and therefore I need to cause traction into it. So right down here, put it down. Check your spine is okay. You might need a breather. See the spine struggling a bit, but she's doing well. Down to individual. Make threshold, but fortunately it's comfortable. A lot of people say it like being, you know, passing a hot back or electric shock, that's the all we've had. So that's pretty much all of it covered. I'm happy with that. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, on a tattoo this size, we want to try and get that facing, you know, as perfect as we can really. But at the same time, you know, if you leave a tiny little bit, don't worry, you'll get it next time. If it's a large tattoo, I would purposely leave a tiny bit of spacing, particularly if a tattoo is very dense, because you don't want too many blisters. Blistering isn't abnormal, but you don't want lots of it. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of work with 532, but it is just going to be a little bit. 532 does tend to cause blisters, which is no fun for anyone. On an ankle like this, if you get blisters, they can take quite some time to heal. This client has had blisters before, she copes them well, but they do, you know, blister, the ankle swells, and it becomes, you know, a bit more problematic just to go about normal life. So I've gone for quite a sensible fluid. I've gone for 1 joule, rep rate 1.25, quite slow now, but just because it's quite a small area, I'm just going to main target these bits here. I'm not going to do anything too crazy. Doesn't need it. If you are one of those practitioners that's a perfectionist, it almost doesn't do you any good in a tattoo situation, that makes sense, and say you almost don't want to treat every single bit depending on the tattoo. Same again, but what you might notice in a second is you're probably going to see more whitening as you get more vapor with 532. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, there's very little there. So that's too low, but that's fine. So not much noise and just literally 1 dot of whiteness. So that's not enough, so that's not a problem. We can turn it up. So now I was on 1, I'm now on 1.5. 1, 2, 3. Better. Comparable. Or comparable. What you might notice is that those dots, as you can see, are quite tiny. Now, with this particular lace that I'm using, that's actually the centre of the beam. That's not the whole beam size. The whole beam size is actually 4 mil, and that's not 4 mil. So what you're going to be careful here is that you don't put those dots right next to each other, because then you are overlapping quite a lot. So it's just knowing that. Some lasers, the centre part is a little bit more even, and you won't get that so much. So now you do a few more. Say, purposely not putting them too close together. Good whitening. Sometimes you just need to look without your goggles, you know, just to feel where you are. You can lose your place. And the other thing that I find, the only problem with doing it for black first is that, you know, she's actually started to, you know, maybe get some bruising, which is very normal. So what's bruising, what things? And I'm looking now without my goggles, and that's it. If you're ever unsure, just press it, and if it's blood, it'll evacuate, so you think, of course, it won't. So that's still definitely in. So just a little bit here. If you go over where you've already treated, as long as it's still white, then it should not respond. As long as you've still got that vapor. But also just try not to overlap too much where you've already been. Just be mindful. We tend to find that the colour comes out quite quickly in a few sessions. So Again, I don't need to do every bit today. You know, I can work on it over the session with the black. You know, black needs laser, and it's the outline. The black's going to need more. So there's no need to go too crazy with colour. If you do, say clients will pay the price, and you'll get quite a few blisters. So now we've got quite a funky looking bird. Looks like it's got something going on there, but that's good, that's what we want. So then lastly, we are just going to carry on cooling, and I'm going to put some of our, just like see there, Lynton white glue on. So just put a nice layer of this on. If it's an area where it's going to rub, so for example, you know, blow it down and you're worried about shoes, or it's bleeding, then you can put a dressing on. So just a non-stick dressing with tape can be applied, and that will just obviously protect it. And if it's bleeding, I'd always put a dressing on just so that you're helping to stem the blood flow, but also so you don't want any infection. So that's really nice and treated there. And we'll see this client back in at least 12 weeks, but we find this particular client should take longer than that to heal. So for this particular client, we wait several months. And that, as we've learned, is not always a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing. So it'll be a while before she has another treatment.
Okay, so here we have a passive Q switch laser. So as we learned this morning, a laser that's just a little bit sort of gentler in its approach. You can normally tell it's passive by the way it's delivered. So normally when it's got sort of the cord cable like this, and also the handpiece will look somewhat like that. So you can see it's not an articulated arm. It is just a normal sort of regular handpiece with a button for firing. And then with our particular system, we do have different spacers, which you can just see here on the top of the machine. So these are called spacers because you simply insert them into the end of the handpiece. And with this one, it just pushes in, so you can see there. And then you are a certain distance away from the skin. So we would just hold it directly onto the skin, and then we can start firing. So that guarantees that sort of distance there, that gap guarantees that our energy that we put into the machine is correct. Now you'll notice with ours that actually we have two spacers. Some systems will only have one. Now, when you only have one spacer, typically it will be fixed onto the handpiece, and you will have to just simply pull away from the skin to, you know, consider getting higher energies. Of course, you'll change it on the machine, obviously, but once you've increased the fluence on the system and got to the absolute maximum that you can, you may then be taught to just simply, you know, pull away from the skin and just come further back. And as you come further back, it should get stronger, and then you'll actually hit the focal point, and then it'll actually get weaker. Now with ours, we like a bit more of a sort of accurate, I suppose, approach to it really. So you can just about see here that the silver one is a 5mm and the red one is a 3mm. So we do have different ends. They might look the same in terms of the length and the size on the end, but the lens, which I probably can't really show you on camera unfortunately, but the lens inside is in a different place, so you get a different focal point. So what we teach is, start with the largest. So start with that 5mm spot or whatever you've got on your machine. The reason why we want you to start at the largest is because, if you remember, the largest penetrates the deepest, but also you will of course just cover more ink in one go. But it is to do with penetration depth as well. The only problem with large spot sizes are that you unfortunately can't get very high energies out. So if you want a higher energy, you will need to go down to a smaller spot size. So if you look at the machine here, you can see that you've got just quite a simple display, and you've got how many shots the system has actually done so far. You have got the wavelength, and you've got spot size at this stage. Obviously all machines are slightly different in the way that you program them, but the information that you put in should be always primarily the same. So what we always teach is set wavelength first. So determine, do you want 1064, 694 if it's available, or 532, and there are actually other wavelengths as well, other than those three, but they're the main three. And the main two are 1064 and 532. So choose your wavelength first. Then again, largest spot size. So with this particular machine, I would turn it up to 5 there, as you can see. And then of course what's really important is that you do put the right spacer therefore into the handpiece. So say with ours, nice and easy, they just simply slot in, and then it's just a push. So once you've chosen your wavelength and you've chosen your spot size, really all now you need to do is put the energy in. So with this particular machine, we would just press treat. It's checking is the correct spot size attached, because if it's not, that is going to affect your energy. So if you've told the computer that you've, it's a 5, but you've actually put on a 3, you're going to concentrate the energy more and you're going to make it stronger, which is not, what we want to do, unless that's what you plan on doing, of course. So here now you can see again, you've got your shot count there. With this machine, it's a rolling shot count, so you need to write down what you started on, write down what you ended on, and then subtract. Some machines will just literally tell you how many shots you did in that treatment, but we always encourage you to write that down. Rate is not something I program at this stage, but you can do. Rate is just, or rep rate we call it, is simply just the speed of the laser. So how fast the laser is actually firing. So how many shots are you getting out? So I'll demonstrate that shortly. The main thing at this stage is to ensure that you have got the correct fluence on. So as you can see here, it's starting very low at 0.6 joules per centimetre squared. Your system could, to warn you, work in millijoules, so you might be working in hundreds and thousands, but it's the same principle. So typically, let's say for a black tattoo, a new tattoo, I would be starting on at least 1. As you can see, you can't get exactly 1, but that's not a problem. But what you tend to find is that isn't very high, and certainly on a very, black, dark, dense tattoo, it may be okay. But for a lot of tattoos, that actually won't be high enough, particularly on a passive. If this was an active laser, 1.2 is actually normally quite effective, but we've not got an active laser in this example. This is a passive. So you would just increase it really accordingly based on the skin reaction. As we saw, you want noise, you want whitening, they're the end point. So if you're not getting those, you would just simply increase your fluence. And of course, you can just carry on increasing it until you achieve what you want. Now, what you might just notice there is that as I got up to 6.1 joules, I cannot get any higher than that. It's not possible. And the reason for that is because I'm on a spot size of 5, and basically the machine is not capable of doing that. All machines are the same. There's a limit on what they can do. So in this situation, what I would actually do is reduce the size of the spot. So with this particular machine, you'd actually have to put it into standby. Now you can reduce the spot size, but remember, it's really, really important that you change the end as well. So I'd now need to put the 3mm on. You must make sure you do that, otherwise again it's not going to be right. And then again we can just continue onto the treatment screen. And now once it's ready, you should see that we can go higher in our fluence. So start us at 1.7. But normally, if you've gone up to 6.1, then you normally want higher than that. So you can see now 6.8, 8.5, so on and so forth. And you can see here with this machine, the highest you can go to is 17. which is a high fluent. 17 joules is very good. You know, so you'll have some quite good effects with that on a paler tattoo. So what we know is that as the ink gets less, we need more fluence. So we need to increase that based upon the density and the lightness of the ink. And then, as I say, the rate is just how fast you can fire. So I'm going to demonstrate this in a second, just so I can show you. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate on a piece of paper. So I'm actually going to use a tattoo removal leaflet, which is quite convenient. And this is something you can do, when you are practicing. So you don't just have to treat people. You can actually just get anything out, a magazine, leaflet, anything like that, and you can just practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fire on the black part of her tattoo only. If you look at the computer screen, I'm on 1064, I'm on the largest spot size, and my fluence isn't very high, but it's not low either, it's about 3.7. I've chosen that just because, that's going to be effective for this, situation. But again, it depends, obviously, and of course this isn't a real tattoo. Now at the moment it's programmed on 1.25 hertz, so that's speed, so that's not fast. That's 1.25 shots per second. So I'm just going to show you that. So if I start there, but if I actually start on the blue Lynton, you can hear it and you can just see the white there. So we've got a good noise and we've got some whitening, and that's all we're really looking for. You'll never get as much whitening, or I tend to find you don't with a passive laser as you do with an active. Active you'll always generally see more, but it does depend on the wavelength as well. So 1064 you don't get as much whiteness because it is an epidermal reaction. Obviously for treatment that's not perfect, so where possible, try to put your shots together, but equally try not to overlap either. What you tend to find is that in reality it's not always easy to do it perfectly like that, because tattoos aren't just in a perfect square as they are in this example, or they don't tend to be. They tend to of course be more like this. So just do your best. The main thing I would say is that if it's a very dense tattoo and there's not a lot of gaps and it's quite large, so larger than say your hand outstretched, something like that, then you almost want to leave small gaps to allow the skin to breathe. So you always want to not be perfect. Whereas if it's a tattoo that's got quite a lot of gaps in it, or it's small, then using where you put them next to each other is ideal. So what we would say is treat the black first, which we saw in the actual practical video. So I'm just now going to get started. And there you can see really good whitening, so that's great. Clients look at this and think, oh wow, it's gone. Unfortunately it's not. That is just steam, gas that's been released from the skin, and in a few minutes time that will actually be completely gone. But it looks good, and clients of course like to see it. Now we could treat faster than that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to increase the rate. So instead of 1.25, we're going to try 2.5. So this is twice as fast. So if we go now from where we left off, 1, 2, 3. You can see that's really quite quick. And then lastly, 5 hertz. So again, double the speed. 5 hertz, in my opinion, is only suitable for larger tattoos. If you start using it on small tattoos, I tend to find that people can't move quickly enough, and you will end up doing a lot of overlapping, and that's when you can get problems. So starting here. So as you can see, quite a lot quicker there, and you know, there was a few bits I missed myself around this area. It's not a problem, you know, you can go back, and if you've just missed a little bit, you can go back over and you can just do 1 shot, or 2 shots I think that was, you know, and just fill that bit in. But again, don't always want to be perfect about it, so don't you know, stress too much there. So what you can now see is that the black ink has picked up beautifully, but the colour has not. So you can still see those oranges and pinks quite vibrantly. So this is when now I would obviously write my settings down, and I would stop and I would change over to the 532, which is what I'm going to do. With this particular machine, you just have to unplug the handpiece. So you can just about see that the handpiece plugs in here. So I just have to unplug all of that and plug in a different handpiece. With some of them, you might not have to change it round, it all varies. Okay, so now I am going to use the 532. So it looks the same, but of course it's not, it's green light. So I have programmed the computer even lower with this one, so I've gone for about 1.8, but again it just depends on the ink that's in there. You know, this is something that obviously we've got to assess, and we'd, you know, sort of figure out a lot of this actually in the patch test. So now, if I get back out my original leaflet, I can simply just go over the colour, and while it's still frosted like that, the black won't pick up, because of course 532 does work on black, and we don't want to use 532 on black. It's a shorter wavelength, it doesn't penetrate as deeply, and also you get more blistering with 532. Because it's absorbed more into the epidermis, you will get more blistering. So I use it as little as possible, but if it's red, orange, yellow, pink, then you have to use 532. So now we can just simply go in and just pick out where we can see colour. And you can just about see that flash of green light. So make sure you've got the right goggles on, obviously. So you can see there the colour's picking up really well, and that's a good result. What I always say is because of the 532 causing blisters, use it sparingly. You don't even have to treat every bit of colour, you know, that's not always necessary. You know, just sort of go for bits of it. And actually, if it's a large tattoo, then the first few times I may only do the black. Generally the black is the outline, and so it will need more treatment, so you may not always need to do you know, the colour every time, and the first 2-3 sessions you may not need to use it at all. So work up to using the 532 would be my advice.